Scores. We'll take some score predictions, folks. Leave those in the chat. We'll read them off. We will take your score predictions. Florida State 11.5 according to Vegas. The last I checked, against the Yellow Jackets of Georgia Tech. They were 7-6 last year. They won a bowl game, and we've said it a few times. This will be the last time I'm going to say it, just because it's fun and it'll be in the distant past, 2023. But Mario Cristobal kneels down. Georgia Tech doesn't go to a bowl game, and they're 5-7. We're not talking about them. There seems to be, Georgia. I had a Georgia Tech guy on a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about all the good things going on with the program. Brent Key inherited pretty much a disaster. He's done a decent job. They had their first winning season in a while. There's all these good vibes around the program, but still, if Mario Cristobal just makes the obvious call, 5-7. As you well know, unfortunately, I'll remind you from just a few years ago, 5-7, that plays, especially for a program like Georgia Tech. Florida State, 5-7, 7-6, it's different, but it's like, well, we're Florida State. You don't go 7-6 there either. But for Georgia Tech, there's a good feeling coming off a bowl win against a decent program like UCF and going 7-6 versus going 5-7. Then you're kind of like, well, we're really not that good. So it's that close to there being a negative narrative for Georgia Tech coming into this game.
Yeah, it's different. They're playing with house money. When you've recruited 6 blue chips over the past 4 years and things like that, they're definitely playing over their skis. The thing that has happened, I guess, since last Wednesday, we got a Georgia Tech depth chart. We talked about it a little bit earlier on the morning show over on the main channel. Make sure you guys go check that out. Mark's out here every day in the morning talking about everything college football. You see where the hype comes from about the offense and about the matchup. We've talked a lot in a bunch of different shows how this could be a tight game in the first half. We could definitely see Georgia Tech ain't going to make it easy. Brent Key's a hell of a coach. They've had all offseason to get ready. They're going to have some stuff schemed up. But the real question of what's going to happen in this game is going to happen the end of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. They just don't have the depth yet. Similar to where Florida State was in 21 or 22. You see some bright spots, and you can pull off some wins against some highly ranked programs. You saw Florida State back then in 21 beat a UNC team they had no business beating, or was that 2020? Either way, you come out in the opener in 2021 against Notre Dame, who was a top 10 team, and you take them to overtime. You end up going 0-4 and losing to Jacksonville State. So there is a bit of wiggle room there. You can play over your head, or you can play down to your competition. But just Florida State isn't the team that I feel like is going to go out there and do that. We've seen Mike Norvell be the guy like Brent Key right now of getting done more with less, and now he has the talent. So I could be wrong, but that's where our kind of confidence comes in. I haven't put a score prediction out there, but as you mentioned, 11.5 is the Vegas line at the moment, and I think that's pretty close to where my prediction would probably be. But yeah, there's a ton of matchups we can talk about. I don't think I've spent as much time on the defensive side on the show as we have the offense. So if you have any questions about the defense or want to talk about D-line versus offensive line matchup, we could definitely do that.
Absolutely. And again, folks, leave us your scores in the chat. We'll read them off. I'm going to go to the channel and see what comments come up this week that were left. I see quite a few there, and we will go through those as well. Yeah, so where do you think the Florida State defense, I know that you made a comment about the Andy Staples podcast and him naming Florida State as the best defensive line in college football to start the season, going from defensive line through the linebackers into the secondary versus the standard that was set last year. The two obvious names that come to mind, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, of course, up front, and some losses elsewhere. Take us through the defense in regards to how good you think this unit's going to be.
Yeah, we'll start with that front four and look. Jared Verse, that's the main name, because Jared Verse came through. He made his hay in 2022. He was a no-doubt lock first-round pick. Braden Fisk, this time last year, as excited as we were about him, proven squat. He hadn't been at Florida State very long. He was a little dinged up at the beginning and even towards the middle of the year. So we went out there and we kicked LSU's butt, but it was a little bit less about Braden Fisk, more about Jared Verse, Pat Payton, Josh Farmer, those guys. Yeah, by the end of the year, Braden Fisk was a dump truck. He could have been a first round pick if he'd have done what he did at the end of the year. At the beginning of the year last year, he would have been a first round pick, hands down first round pick. So I would say give time for Daryl Jackson, a guy who was on this roster all last year and at different points of the year, several different separate points of the year. They were talking about him maybe being the best interior guy on the entire team, even though he couldn't play. He's on Bruce Feldman's, top freaks list, top 20 freaks in the country. He's 6'6", 330 pounds. I just mentioned Josh Farmer. He's a guy who, was kind of the second defensive tackle the past couple of years. First next to Fabian Lovett, kind of surpassed him. Then next to Braden Fisk last year at the end of the year. He's that guy. He's ready to take that next step. He's another top 3 round pick for sure. Currently, if I had to draft him today, I'd say he's probably 3rd round, but he can work himself up into the 2nd or 1st round. I mentioned Patrick Payton. He's another demon off the edge who's just been getting better and better and better every year. And now in his 4th year at Florida State, he's ready to just be a beast. So those top 4 positions, they're pretty loaded down. The 3 are pretty, there's not even a second thought of those are great Florida State defensive linemen. We know what they bring. Daryl Jackson hasn't played a ton of snaps for us, but we've seen the tape at Miami, and there's he's been practicing for 2 years. Marvin Jones Jr. is the kind of question of we're not really sure how high that ceiling can go. We know he's locked down a starting spot. We've seen the athleticism on tape in Georgia, but we haven't seen him in this system. We haven't seen that jump yet. The question is, how high is it? Is it Jermaine Johnson, 1st round draft pick? The second he takes a snap for Florida State, just immediately your best player, or is it somewhere a little bit lesser? Is he something like Jared Verse in the 1st year, or is he a little bit better than that, somewhere in between? We're going to find out. But we do know he's the most athletic defensive end we've had on campus in a long, long time, and his ceiling is higher than any of those people I've mentioned if he can put it all together.
I didn't want to be too negative with my Georgia Tech guy on the line, but you look at their last half of the season here, they've got to, outside of Florida, I don't know that they don't have the toughest November in the country. So their final 5 games are Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, and Georgia. It might be tough
when
for
I
them
was
to win a
looking through all
game.
the ACC schedules and I seen theirs, I was like, woof. Yep, they got the Florida schedule of this one. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, their rough deal is that they play Georgia every year. So nobody wants to do that. And they're the team, obviously, because they got that ACC SEC rivalry, just like Florida State does with Florida. So they're one of those big matchups. And Georgia has been the best program in the world the last 3 or 4 years, and they got to deal with them every year. And then when the ACC with this contract with Notre Dame, when that comes up, then they get Notre Dame too and Georgia non-conference. So it's
Yeah, when you look at those different schedules we brought up, like Syracuse, Virginia Tech, a couple different ones, and they miss like 3 of the top 4 teams, like 3 or 4 different teams. And then you look at this one, it's tough. They open up with Florida State. Okay, they get Louisville, UNC, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Miami, NC State, and then Georgia. Yeah, they're playing like 6 of the top 7 teams or 6 of the top 8, whatever it is. I'm surprised. No, they do. And Notre Dame, and they play Notre Dame. Yeah, the poor guys. We'll see. It's going to be tough for Georgia Tech this year. So they'd really like to pull this one off. I'm sure they've got a lot of eggs in that basket. I'm sure they've been working hard. But man, when it comes to Georgia State, Syracuse, and VMI, they really need to win them 3 games.
George, it is always my lean when I predict games, regardless of the game, to start with, I want to take the points. That is usually my first inclination before I'm talking about any game. Like, start with taking the points, because obviously you're getting points. So if Vegas is off on the game, and I'm not thinking they're off on this one, but if they're off, let's say any game that's around a touchdown game on the point spread, especially this early in the season, Vegas could be off on who's just flat out the better team. So you're
Mm-hmm.
already getting, let's say, 6 or 7 points. So take it. So I'm coming at it from that standpoint. But what typically happens in these kind of games is that a Georgia Tech puts together a nice game plan. They give it all they've got. They stay in the game. But man, football games are long. They're not basketball games. They're long. And man, look at Duke last year. They had a late third quarter lead and they were knocking on the door to widen the lead. That's when they went for the 4th down. Riley Leonard got hurt. They went for the 4th down. They screwed up, didn't get it. But they had a lead at that point with maybe 3 or 4 minutes left in the third quarter. They lost by 18 points. And that's not unusual when like a top 5 to 10 teams playing like a top 50 team. That it's a good ball game for quite a while, but once once the more talented physical team breaks through, and that's what pulls me back from taking that 11 and a half and running with it, because this game could be 17-14 to start the fourth quarter and it's 34-14 final score.
Yeah. Here's the question. How soon does FSU put their backups in for Georgia Tech's first team to all of a sudden get those garbage time points, if that's the situation?
That too.
No, I agree 100%. Like their first team, I don't know about the defense, but the offense may be able to match in the first half if they really have their A game. But as you pointed out, once you get into snaps, 50 and 60 and 70 on the defense and even the offensive linemen get tired just like defensive linemen. Everybody gets tired. And you're playing a Florida State who goes 8, 9, 10 deep on their O-line, and they are going to be rotating. Florida State doesn't just send out 5, and if we're lucky, those are the only 5 that play. 8 to 10 guys are going to play every single game. So they're going to be wearing them down. They're not going to want to they're not going to want to rotate their defensive line or O-line. And it's the same thing with our defensive lineman. Andy Staples said that. We only talked about the top 4 guys. We didn't talk about the other 6. I mean, we have 6 deep at tackle. There's 6 tackles that are comfortable playing. You go Daniel Lyons, Grady Kelly, KJ Sampson. All those guys are going to get snaps. Out of the edge, it's more like 4 guys. Tomiwa Durajaye, Sione Luluhea, Byron Turner, 5, I guess. Those 5 guys at the end. So 10, 11 guys between tackle and defensive end that Florida State can rotate in at a starter at an all ACC type level. That's going to wear on me. I would be shocked if Georgia Tech isn't tired and kind of the hay is in the barn with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But you never know. If this thing gets shortened, that's the one thing I will say. Let me say this, because I've been super confident. The thing that comes along with being a good offense, running offense, and shortening it, they could shorten the game and keep their guys fresh. If they could do that, they could somehow have 2 or 3 different 8-minute drives in the first half, and cash them in for touchdowns, only give Florida State a couple possessions. Like if they could somehow stay fresh until that fourth quarter, it could be anybody's game, but it's going to be really, really tough to do that.